Tokens per dollar per watt.
It sounds like a formula you'd find scribbled on a chalkboard in some basement physics lab, doesn't it?
It really does. Or maybe the obscure pricing model for a very, very boring utility company.
Yeah.
But what if I told you that this little string of words isn't just tech jargon, but is actually the new formula for global dominance? Would you think I'm being a little dramatic?
I would usually say yes, but I mean, looking at the stack of reports we have on the desk today, I think you're spot on. That equation is basically it's the new E equals MC squared for the digital economy.
That is a big claim. But welcome back to the deep dive. We are tearing into a fascinating collision of worlds today.
We really are.
We've got a stack of notes all centered around this pivotal moment at Davos, January 2026. The central figure is Microsoft CEO Satya Nadella.
Yeah.
But the implications, I mean, they go way beyond just Microsoft.
Right. And usually when we talk about big tech CEOs at Davos, you expect the usual bingo card, buzzwords like synergy, the cloud, maybe the metaverse if we were like that's stuck in 2022. But this year it was different. Nadella went to Switzerland and effectively changed the whole conversation from software to industrial strategy.
I'll admit, the terminology threw me at first. I've spent the last decade thinking of AI as this ethereal, invisible thing that lives in the cloud.
Yeah.
But reading through these sources, specifically the analysis by Johan Steyn, you realize the cloud is actually a pretty terrible marketing term for what we're actually building.
It sounds soft, doesn't it? Fluffy, vaporous.
Exactly. But what Nadella and Steyn are describing isn't soft at all. It's heavy industry. It's steel, silicon, and just massive power draws. Our mission today is to figure out why we've stopped talking about apps and started talking about factories.
And that shift is so crucial. The misconception we need to shatter right now is that AI is just code. It's not. It's becoming an energy story, a trade story, and frankly, a national security story.
So you're saying a country's electricity bill might actually determine its future GDP?
That is the headline. And by the end of this, we'll explain why your local power grid matters more than your download speed, and why a farmer in India just proved that the whole mobile era of technology is officially dead.
Okay, let's dig into this. Segment 1, the token factory. As I said, the word factory implies smokestacks, assembly lines, guys in hard hats. What exactly is a token factory in the context of 2026?
Well, it's barely a metaphor at this point. When Nadella talks about a factory, I want you to picture the sheer physicality of it. We are not talking about a server rack in a closet somewhere.
Yeah.
We are talking about warehouses the size of 10 football fields, packed with racks of silicon that run so hot they need industrial-scale water cooling systems just to keep from melting down.
So it's closer to a steel mill than a startup office.
Precisely. And just like a steel mill, it eats energy. Nadella introduced this definition to describe the new industrial base. I mean, think about what is required to get an answer from an AI, what we call a token in computing terms.
And a token is basically the unit of output, right?
Yeah.
Like a single word or a piece of an image.
Correct. But to manufacture that token, you need this massive physical supply chain. You need the data center itself. You need the specific GPUs inside. You need the fiber optic networks connecting them. And most critically, you need the electricity to turn that raw computing power, raw compute into usable AI output. That entire stack, that is the token factory.
So when I ask a chatbot a question and it spits out an answer, that's not magic. It's a manufacturing process.
It is a manufactured good, and Nadella used a really powerful analogy here. He compared it to the electricity grid itself.
Which makes sense. You plug a lamp in, it just lights up. You don't think about the coal plant or the wind farm that's miles down the line.
Exactly. Think about the Industrial Revolution. To run a modern economy, you need a ubiquitous energy grid. If you don't have electrons on tap, you don't have a factory, you don't have lights, you don't have growth. Nadella is arguing that the world is right now building a ubiquitous grid for tokens for intelligence. Just like you need energy on tap, the future economy needs intelligence on tap.
Which brings us right back to that hook. Tokens per dollar per watt.
Right. And Johan Steyn's analysis of this is just fascinating because he strips away all the magic. He points out that this isn't some catchy slogan, it is a ruthless competitiveness metric.
It sounds like an efficiency rating for an engine or something.
It is. It highlights all the physical bottlenecks. If you want to be a leader in AI, you are not constrained by how many smart coders you have anymore. You're constrained by physics. Do you have the electricity supply? Is your grid stable enough to run at 99.9% uptime? Do you have the water for the cooling towers? Can you get the land permits? Can you afford the massive capital expenditure to build the concrete shell?
It's so interesting because for the last 20 years, the whole tech story has been about two guys in a garage building a billion-dollar company on a laptop.
Right.
This sounds like the complete opposite. This sounds like you need the resources of a nation-state to even play the game.
That is the fundamental shift. The era of two guys in a garage building the infrastructure is over. Now, two guys in a garage might use the infrastructure, but they can't build the factory. And here is where Steyn's insight really cuts through. He argues that if a country cannot produce these tokens cheaply, if their tokens per dollar per watt ratio is bad, they don't just stop using AI.
They have to import it.
They have to buy the tokens.
And that sounds innocent enough. I mean, we import bananas, we import cars, but importing intelligence, that feels different.
It is wildly different. I mean, think about the implication. If you are buying your intelligence from somewhere else, you are inheriting someone else's pricing power. You're operating under someone else's regulatory rules. You essentially become dependent on someone else's grid.
That sounds incredibly risky. It's like relying on your neighbor for your water supply. If they decide to shut the tap or raise the price by 400%, or just decide they don't like your politics that week, you're done.
It creates a massive leverage point. And that transitions us perfectly into the geopolitical reality of this. This isn't just about business competition. This is about sovereignty.
And the sources mentioned that at Davos 2026, there was this palpable collision between AI and politics. It wasn't just tech enthusiasts high-fiving each other.
No, Reuters reported on this extensively. The whole vibe shifted from who has the best code to who gets to build what where. It's become a game of haves and have-nots.
Steyn brings up a specific example that I found really grounding, South Africa. And I think this is important because we so often talk about AI from a US or European perspective where, the lights usually stay on.
It's the crucial example. Steyn focuses on South Africa to illustrate the stakes for countries that have energy constraints. We all know South Africa has struggled with load-shedding rolling blackouts and grid instability for years now.
Right. So if Nadella is saying the future is these massive energy-hungry token factories, and you're a country that is already telling citizens to turn off their geysers at 6 p.m., that argument must hit like a ton of bricks.
It's a brutal reality check. The risk Steyn identifies is that in these environments, if you cannot guarantee the watts, you cannot build the factory. So AI remains an imported service. It sits above the economy. It's a layer you pay for, sending money out of the country to Microsoft or Google or OpenAI, rather than an industry that sits inside your economy, creating jobs and infrastructure.
It's the difference between having a domestic auto industry and just being a country that drives Toyotas.
It's worse. It's like being a country that has to pay a toll to a foreign power every single time someone has a thought or drafts an email. And Nadella himself voiced concern about this. The Financial Times reported that he's worried about an AI bubble.
Now, when people hear bubble, they think stock market crash. The dot-com bust.
He's not talking about the stock price. He's talking about a usage bubble. If the adoption and the benefits of AI stay concentrated in just a few big tech companies and a few wealthy countries with stable power grids, it becomes a bubble of privilege, doesn't actually diffuse to the rest of the world.
And I imagine that's not just an unfairness issue. That sounds like a recipe for global instability.
Oh, 100%. Steyn analyzes this as a stability problem. Uneven diffusion breeds protectionism. It breeds distrust. If half the world feels like the other half is using a super weapon of economic productivity that they can't access because they lack the voltage, walls go up. Trade wars start. It gets messy.
So on one hand, we have this massive industrial challenge. The factories are expensive, they're hot, and they need power that a lot of places just don't have.
Yeah.
But on the other hand, the promise of the tech itself is supposedly incredible. I want to pivot to what the tech actually does, because the sources get into some really cool metaphors here, and I'm a sucker for tech history.
They do. And it's so important to understand why we are building these factories. What's the product, right?
We've had some great metaphors in the past. Steve Jobs calling the PC a bicycle for the mind. I've always loved that. It implies human effort, but amplified. You can go further with less energy.
And Bill Gates gave us information at your fingertips.
Which was accurate. We got Wikipedia and Google. But Nadella is sort of updating the dictionary here. He's calling AI a cognitive amplifier. He says the impact isn't just efficiency. It's a 10 to 100 times boost.
He also references Raj Reddy, the Turing Award winner, who used the term guardian angel.
Guardian angel is a huge step up from bicycle. A bicycle doesn't watch your back. A bicycle doesn't think for you.
Exactly. But the distinction Nadella makes between the mobile era, the era we are just now leaving, and this new AI era is what I found most illuminating.
Let's tear that apart, because we've all been living in the mobile era for the last 15 years. We all have smartphones.
Yeah.
We are addicted to them.
Right. And Nadella argues that the mobile era was largely consumption-led. It gave us the creator economy, which sounds productive, but for 99% of people, it was about consumption. Social media, video streaming, endless scrolling. It was about capturing your attention.
It kept us entertained. It gave us influencers. But to your point, scrolling TikTok for 3 hours didn't exactly teach me how to be a surgeon.
Yeah.
It didn't make me better at my taxes.
Exactly. It didn't inherently make you a better finance expert or a better healthcare provider just by having the phone in your pocket. It was a window into content. But the AI era, according to the sources, it must be productivity-led. It's not about scrolling. It's about getting a job or doing a job better.
This is where that story about the Indian farmer comes in. I really loved this example because it just breaks the stereotype that AI is only for Silicon Valley coders or, kids cheating on their homework.
It's the perfect counter-narrative. Nadella shared the story of a rural farmer in India. Now, this isn't someone with a computer science degree. This is someone dealing with the daily complexities of agriculture and bureaucracy. And he was using a bot built on early GPT technology.
And he wasn't asking it to write a poem or generate a picture of a cat in space?
No, he was using it to reason over farm subsidy forms. Now, anyone who has dealt with government bureaucracy in any country knows how dense and confusing those forms are. They are written in legalese, and he was doing it in his local language, interacting with a bot that understood his dialect.
But here's the aha moment for me in that story. The bot didn't just chat with him. It didn't just say, here's a link to the form.
No, it showed what's called agentic behavior.
Agentic, that's the buzzword. That means agency, action.
It completed the form for him. It reasoned through the requirements, took his input, and then executed the task. That is the bridge. That is how you take someone who might be left behind by the digital divide, maybe because of literacy barriers, language barriers, or just the sheer complexity of the system, and you give them a cognitive amplifier.
That is massive. That's the difference between here's a website, good luck, and here's an expert assistant who actually works for you.
Precisely. And that bridges the gap between the haves and have-nots on an individual level. It takes expertise, which used to be scarce and expensive, and makes it abundant and cheap.
But, and there's always a but in these deep dives.
There's always a cost.
Let's go back to the factory. That farmer's bot was incredibly helpful. But to process that form, to do that reasoning, it burned watts. A lot of them.
Which brings us to segment 4. The concept of social permission.
This is a term Steyn highlights from Nadella's talk, and I think it's going to be the defining phrase of the next few years. Social permission. Basically, do we as a society allow this industry to even exist at this scale?
We have to acknowledge the resource cost. We are diverting scarce energy, water for cooling, land, all to these token factories. In a world concerned about climate change and resource scarcity, Steyn argues that society will not tolerate that indefinitely if the output is, frivolous.
Right. If my lights are flickering or my water bill goes up because a data center next door is training a model to write better marketing jingles or generate deepfake videos, I'm going to be mad. I'm going to want that factory shut down.
Exactly. The outcomes must be tangible. They must be essential. We are talking about better health, better education, better public services. If the tokens don't improve the human condition, the factory loses its license to operate.
The sources gave a healthcare scenario that really painted this picture well, because healthcare is one of those places where we all feel the system breaking down every day.
Yes. Think about the current state of a doctor's visit. High burnout for staff, very short visits for patients. Doctors spend a huge amount of their time just staring at screens, typing into electronic medical records, figuring out billing codes. It's just administrative hell.
I think we've all had that appointment where the doctor types more than they look at us. You feel like you're interrupting their data entry.
The tangible benefit scenario, the scenario that earns social permission, is AI handling the transcription, entering the records, picking the billing codes automatically, and cross-referencing the diagnosis. And the doctor spends that time actually looking at the patient.
So the technology fades into the background and the human connection comes back to the foreground.
That is the only way the energy cost becomes justifiable. We trade watts for health. We trade watts for human connection. That is how you earn social permission.
But there's one more hurdle to clearing that bar, and that's skilling. Because even if the factory is built and the tools exist, People need to actually know how to use them.
Nadella was very, very clear on this. The diffusion of this technology, how widely it spreads, is correlated to one thing and one thing only: skilling.
And Steyn had a warning here specifically for educators. And this part actually scared me a little bit.
It should. He pointed out that this widens the opportunity gap. Think about schools that can afford these AI tools, schools that have the connectivity to run them, and schools that have teachers trained to support them. Their students are going to have a cognitive amplifier. They are riding the bicycle.
And schools that don't.
Their students are competing with just their brains against students who have effectively infinite minds on tap. Steyn argues that AI literacy is no longer just a nice career advantage like learning Excel or Photoshop. It is a civic issue. It is a prerequisite for participation in the modern economy.
That is heavy.
Yeah.
It really changes how you look at a laptop in a classroom. It's not just a screen anymore. It's a portal to the factory. And if that portal is closed, you're locked out of the economy.
It creates a new form of inequality that is much, much harder to overcome than just income inequality.
So let's bring this all together. We've covered a massive amount of ground today. We started with that confusing equation, tokens per dollar per watt. We moved through the physical, sweaty reality of the token factory. We looked at the geopolitical risks of being dependent on someone else's grid, the digital colonialism risk, if you will.
We saw the shift from the mobile consumption era to the AI production era.
And we landed on the necessity of social permission, that these factories have to earn their keep by actually making life better, not just making tech companies richer.
It's a journey from the very, very technical to the deeply societal.
So what are the takeaways here? If you are listening to this, whether you run a company, vote in elections, or just try to understand where the world is going, what do you actually do with this information?
I think there are two clear buckets here based on the sources. First, for policymakers.
The people making the rules and planning the power grids.
Right. AI strategy cannot just be about ethics and safety guidelines. Those are important, don't get me wrong, but Steyn is practically screaming from the rooftops that AI strategy must be industrial strategy. It's energy resilience. It's infrastructure. You cannot outsource the foundations of your intelligence economy and expect to be sovereign.
Don't outsource the factory floor. If you want the intelligence, you need the watts to produce it. Got it. And for business leaders.
Stop treating AI as procurement. It's not like buying new office chairs or subscribing to a new payroll software. It is operational risk. If your AI capacity is priced in a foreign currency or relies on a grid you don't control, your business is fragile. You need to understand your supply chain for intelligence just as well as you understand your supply chain for raw materials.
That is a fundamental shift in mindset. You're not buying software, you're buying energy futures.
It is. And for everyone else, educators, parents, workers, it's about demanding that tangible outcome. If we are spending these resources, we need to see the benefit in our daily lives. We need to be the farmer with the agentic bot, not the user scrolling past another ad.
I want to leave the listener with a final thought, and this is something that really stuck with me from the source material. It kind of haunts me.
Go for it.
The geopolitics of AI aren't coming in the future. They are already here. The factories are being built right now. The concrete is pouring. The cables are being laid. The question the sources pose is this: is your country or even your company arriving at this new era prepared to build its own capacity? Or are you arriving destined to be dependent on someone else's factory?
That is the billion-dollar or perhaps the trillion token question.
Yeah.
Are you a builder or are you just a customer?
It certainly is. It's a lot to think about next time you see a loading icon on your screen. Until next time, keep diving deep.